This interview is brought to you by Transformational Mortgage Solutions. You can check out the full episode at LykkenOnLending.com.
Here's Marilyn Richardson, President and CEO of Mason-McDuffie, and Jason Frazier, award-winning marketer and podcaster. Joining me on the podcast today is Marilyn Richardson, the mother of Jason Frazier. Now, many of you know who Jason is. Jason invited me. He's the founder of the Industry Syndicate, along with several other gentlemen. He invited me to be one of the original guys that got in on that, to be a member of it, and we're honored to be there. So, Marilyn, welcome, and happy post-Mother's Day. Good to have you here. And then, Jason, welcome as well.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Well, this is so easy for Jason. He does these all the time. But, Marilyn, Jason interviewed you much on his podcast yet?
Actually, this is my very first interview on a podcast.
Wow. So you have a son who's a podcast star, and then we have you. And Jason, come on, what's the deal here? Your mom was so dynamic when I met her. It was so...
So thanks for bringing that up, Dave. So I'm sure that's waiting for a later time. So that's but she's actually... She doesn't know it yet, but she's actually going to be in line with the new podcast that I started with Christine Beckwith-Stiles on the Mortgage X podcast, so that she will be a future guest on that one.
That's awesome. Well, I love Christine. It's just amazing.
Nice save there, Jason.
Nice save, yeah. I don't know if you were on the guest list or not, Marilyn, but we just got you invited.
That is. How quick it was to come up with that.
So what we want to do is honoring moms, and so, Marilyn, we just want to honor you, and you are to be honored as both a mom of a, I think, pretty dynamic guy, a leader in our industry, Jason, but you're also a leader in the mortgage industry. And what I want to do is just let our audience get to know the both of you just briefly. So, Marilyn, give us a little bit of an intro into yourself, how you got in the mortgage industry, and then if you could tie it in, how you talked Jason into it, if you did, and then we'll get over to Jason. So, Marilyn, why don't you start off with the story and let our audience get to know you?
Well, probably not that unusual that I really didn't plan to be in the mortgage business, but I was busy saving money for college, and I had a friend who had an opening. She said that her company had an opening for a receptionist, and that company happened to be a mortgage company. And I was 19, 20 years old at the time, and I said, great, it was more money than I was making where I was working at the time. So I went over there, and interestingly enough, I just really found it very interesting business and just started learning, going from job to job. I went from being a receptionist to being a loan shipper to being a loan closer to being a loan processor to an underwriter. Actually worked in servicing for a while. So I just wanted to learn all I possibly could about the mortgage business. And so it ended up being my career.
At the same company, if I recall correctly. Was that at Mason-McDuffie that whole time?
No. Actually, I started off with the name was National First Mortgage in Southern California. So that was the company where I learned the majority of my skills, and then moved from that company to Mason-McDuffie in Southern California. Okay. And so I worked in that area, and then I received a promotion to move to Northern California. And at that time, Mason-McDuffie was a partnership, a very old partnership that started in 1887. And they had no female partners, and I became the first female partner in 1979. Wow. So that was it was very interesting to be the first female partner. The majority of the partners did not want a female partner. I was really lucky. I think it's a testament to the need to have mentorship as you build your career. And my boss was my mentor and refused to, unfortunately was a big enough owner that he refused to bring in any additional partners unless they voted me in. And that's how I got in.
That's awesome. Well, let's honor that partner. Who is that partner?
Yes. His name is Don Tetson.
Oh, my gosh, that's a name, the blast from the past. Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, he definitely was a great boss. And my career just kept on going. And I eventually, in this Mason-McDuffie, became CEO and president. Jason, he got into the business. He was in technology. And whenever I would have questions about technology in the mortgage business, I would ask him. And, of course, he had to become familiar with the mortgage business to answer my questions. And also, you know, he obviously knew a lot of the other managers. I was always bringing him in when he was young and introducing him to people. And so we were just lucky that we had an opportunity to get him to come on. I can't remember the year, Jason probably can, but we knew that things were changing rapidly and talked him into coming in and being our CIO and helping us prepare for all of, you know, the future of the business and where it's going as far as social media presence and marketing and all of that. So that's kind of how we got him into mortgage banking. He was born into it, I guess you could say.
He was born in that. Yeah, that's excellent. Jason, what year was that? And then let's talk about your really pretty amazing technology career, your first career, and how that has really drew you into it. Talk about your journey into it, but also lead up to it by what you were doing in technology. That's so fascinating.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when I got started, I actually got started just selling software, and then, you know, just had a few opportunities to get into IT, and just, I had just very lucky to be able to work in a lot of different jobs and positions in IT, which made me well-rounded. And, you know, IT now is a lot different than it was when I was coming up in the 90s or late 90s. And that's when the .com boom was happening and everything else. And everyone wanted to have an internet company. And so it was really just, you know, fortuitous to be coming up in technology at that time and learning and working around so many great people, and also learning from a lot of mistakes. And so, you know, with that, having a lot of those different backgrounds with, like, you know, actually building computers to building networks to doing system administration, web development, you know, basically every position in IT I held at some point. So that allowed me, you know, bigger opportunities to work in other industries. And through that, I eventually got paired up with Peter Thiel and his hedge fund the end of 2004, beginning in 2005, and that's, you know, right after Facebook. And eBay had just purchased PayPal, which, you know, Peter was a founder of with Elon Musk. And so, you know, I got kind of my start into more of a higher end technology with venture capital and technology startups, and really got to, you know, I got to work with LinkedIn and consult with them and some bigger players that are out there right now, like Keith Boy, who's one of the founders of Open Door. And it was just a great opportunity to do that. But, you know, for anyone that's ever worked in that type of environment, especially in finance and hedge funds during 2005 through the crash, knows that that was an insane environment, and it was very common for me to be working 36-hour shifts, sleeping in the office, you know, working 24 hours without sleep. Now, at that time, you know, I would be lying if I say that I didn't enjoy it. You know, to a certain extent, enjoyed the work, loved the environment. I love what we were building. It was truly I would never change any of that, just because of the people I got to work with and people got to be around, and seeing the on-demand technology society and culture that we're living today basically get birthed through a lot of these companies. You know, it was just something great. And so I took a sabbatical at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, because I didn't really need the work. I'd made quite a bit of money. And so I did kind of like a mini retirement that lasted for about 2 weeks before I got bored out of my mind, and talked to, you know, I had been a consultant and helped, like my mom had said, that when they kind of brought back Mason-McDuffie in its current, and so I helped them with technology stuff. That was around 2005, but I came on as a consultant in 2009, and then joined the company full time at the end around I think like August or September of 2009 is when I started full time at the mortgage company.
Gosh, 10 years ago. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Talk about having a mom in the mortgage industry. From your perspective, we've opened up and receiving women into the marketplace, specifically in the mortgage industry. I mean, they've always been there, but into leadership positions. And your mom was the first to break the ceiling. I'd love to get your perspective first. I'm talking about the glass ceiling, the infamous glass ceiling, and I'll give your perspective first, and then Marilyn will come back to you and talk to you about what that was like. Jason?
Yeah. So growing up, it's funny as we talked about like getting in the mortgage business is that I can remember quite a few times where, my mom told me the last thing I wanted to do was ever be working in the mortgage business because of how crazy it is. And, stressful, complicated job. And so, she obviously went through a lot of, especially, being a woman and back in the, late 70s, early 80s and that type of, good old boys club that we've talked about before, Dave. And so it was, learning from her, seeing her, I attribute all my work ethic, how I learned about business, how I approach problems, to learning from her and watching her work, the amount of hours she put in as a mom that took care of my sister and myself, and then full-time working, business trips and everything, and still managed to, make everything work, right? It wasn't always pretty. It wasn't always great, but at the same time, she did everything she could in her power to, make sure we had a comfortable upbringing and were loved and everything else. But at the same time, never let the quality of her work, fail. And so that's one thing that I took away. It's something that, I believe that you either have or you don't. It's not something that you learn. It's something that you can harness and make better. But I believe I got that from her and watching her and see how she did. And I think in this day and age with, kind of the hustle and work ethic culture that we have and work-life balance, a lot of it gets a bad rap. But to me, I think there's a certain element of, just of greatness when you can not let things fail, right, at work and then still have that family life. Because a lot of times, like me, I love to work. I love doing what I do. And even if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would still find a way to do what I do. And so, learning from her, watching her as a woman, that's why whenever I've been in a position to where I can, because in the business it's still that way, and just, in our economy is still that way, is one thing I learned is that I love to work with women who are strong and who do want to achieve and be successful and do everything they can. I want to make sure as a man in this industry, I could do whatever I can. It's part of what we're doing with the Mortgage X podcast is making sure that we're profiling women. It's starting to get a lot better in the industry. It still has a long way to go, but, it's part of what I learned from my mom and seeing that and understanding that just like what she had mentioned with Dawn Tetson, making it happen for her to become partner, she still had to achieve it. She still had to be successful and still had to be worthy of it, but still he needed that help. So that's one thing that I had always, taken is that whenever I would be in, and I've had, been blessed to be in a position of management and executive level as well, and C-level is, if there is a way to promote, a woman or, help someone get into that position to be successful and give them every opportunity to do so, I want to make sure I took full advantage of that.
That's so good. Marilyn, what was it like then compared to now for you? And part of it, I'm asking the question because my daughter, who is 27 years old, is just getting into the mortgage business, tried other things. She's an artist, and she's finally getting in. I'm not sure if it's a career she would have chosen, but the gravitational pull, I think, is like Jason. It was a gravitational pull. He ended up there. Our daughters ended up there. And I look back from then to now, help these gals that are coming into the industry now realize how fortunate they are to come into it at this time in this season. Talk about the difference of the contract.
Well, yeah, very fortunate. It definitely, Jason's right. You had to work hard. I mean, that's a given. That especially when I came in, I was watched more. The expectations for me were more than the male partners. And there was just things that we had to overcome. For example, the meetings that we had were a club in San Francisco that didn't even allow females. So it was like, oh my gosh, where are we going to, where can we meet now since we have this female that we have to accommodate? And they had separate restrooms for the partners, but they had to change that since I was female and all the rest of them were males. But it took a long time. Also, even just the other partners were making more money than I was making. And so it took a few years for them to recognize. I actually had one of them tell me, well, men have to make more money because they have to support their family. And at the time, I was a single mom raising two children. Wow. So, and a mom. My mom, I took care of my mom as well. So It was like, well, I'm having to raise a family also. And then we would have we may have a few of the partners and we would have a guest in that we were having a meeting. And once one of our guests was a male, and he turned to me and asked me to go get a cup of coffee because he just assumed I was the secretary there taking notes and wasn't one of the partners. And, just things of that would come come up, so, you were always kind of aware of the fact that you were, different, and the expectations were different. And really interesting, I know since the year that Jason was born actually is the first year where they came out with regulations where we couldn't ask a female if they were going to have any more children in order to use their income to qualify for a loan. And, women today, they're like, what, are you kidding? You really had to ask those questions in order to use the income from a woman, because it was just assumed that women would stay home and take care of children. So I would get some of that as well from the men in the office. It's like, shouldn't you be home? Especially men that reported to me. You had that feeling of, I'm the one that should have your job simply because I'm the male and you're the female, and I'm not going to take orders from a female. So you were, over the years, fortunately that got better as more and more women just needed to have the opportunity. And as long as you do your job and you do your job well, it will eventually come. But I think today there's more assumption that they will do their job just as well as their male counterparts, where that wasn't true when I came into the business. But having said that, I also feel very, very fortunate that I got into a business where I could do that. Compared to some businesses where that would have never happened because women didn't have the opportunity to progress. And being a loan producer, for example, as long as they brought in loans, that was okay. Yep. And so you had more of an opportunity to show what you could do. And I did. And no doubt that I had to work harder. I had to work longer. I had to show results. But on the other hand, I feel like I was given a great opportunity to build a career in this business, and it's been very good to me.
Well, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for you persevering through some of that and much of that, because you're now such a great leader and for our role model for those in our industry that are coming into the industry, the women that are coming up and into the industry. And one of my favorite movies is Hidden Figures. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I love that movie. It's just got such a redemptive theme and strategy about the three women that worked, the black women that worked inside of NASA. And you see what happened, especially when Mary Jackson, which was such a brilliant mathematician, engineer, and what she had to overcome was just so astounding. And I think, to some degree, to varying degrees, that has been true in many industries and certainly in the mortgage industry. So kudos to you, Marilyn, for overcoming. I love that. Jason, as you watched your mom go through that, what are some of the things that you learned and some painful parts? There's got to be some times where it's just like, that's just wrong. It's so injustice. And talk about that and what you learned that you carry into your career and now planting in other people.
Yeah, well, I think, growing up, a lot of that stuff, my mom was good at not really getting into the daily grind of the work and that type of stuff, even though, there would be times where it was more obvious than not that that's kind of how it was. But, what I noticed is more of just the work and then obviously health, the toll that it takes on your health and your ability to do certain things. And so growing up in that type of environment, again, I always go back to, just like with any kid, I go back to what I learned just by watching, right? It's part of what I did when I worked for Peter, just being a sponge and whatnot. But, a lot of it is my mom made it. Not that I don't think we've ever really had this conversation, but looking back, I would think that a lot of what my mom tried to do was not bring, the work baggage home with her and what she was dealing with. But, I would, as we had like company events and as a kid, being a part of those and seeing the interactions and stuff like that, it clearly was, looking back at it now, it's clearly like, oh, wow, that definitely is an old boys club. And even though, and Dave, this is some people, especially when you're dealing with people that have been in the industry a few decades that were back from, those old times, that I will still be in some meetings or some conferences or whatever, and that still is somewhat kind of the mindset. I don't think it's... You do
see it, sadly.
I don't think it's like, kind of like on purpose per se, but that's just kind of how they came up, and that's what they did. And so, getting like, when she mentioned like getting coffee or something like that, that would be something like, like with the sweeties and the deers and all that other stuff. So it's one of those things that you see, that you notice that, and as I became older, you notice it. But, I would say that my mom was really good at kind of, I don't want to say shielding us from it, but just at, when she got home, try to do what she can to enjoy the family time and be with the family and do what she could as a mom. And then, was work mode, then that's what she did. And again, I think even though part of my DNA, I think I've tried to learn a lot with that, just with my own family and kids, is try not, when I come home, and try to turn off that switch, which is incredibly hard for me to do, but turn off that switch and not bring in the baggage from work to let it interfere with the time you do have with your kids.
Marilyn, how did you do that? To realize that you're not only a caregiver to your mom, but you're a single mom raising children. I know how difficult it is. My wife's a stay-at-home mom, and blessed to have very fortunately to have a very good marriage, and I know how much work it is for us to try to make everything. How did you do that? And then how did you put those borders up? Because there is, even though it's gotten better, there's still some of that out there. So what would you say to the younger crowd that's coming in?
Well, I think for me, although I was a caregiver for my mom, having her with me was also a blessing because she helped a lot at the house. She made sure, she'd pick up my kids after work, and she would help with the dinners and help with the laundry. And so even though I was supporting her, she was supporting us. I was supporting her financially. She was supporting us with love and support and, all of those things. And it made my life easier. So that for sure was a real blessing for all of us. I think the other was kind of selfish, because if I couldn't make that division, then I would lose out on the happy times with my children, because those times, because I did work, the times with them after work and on the weekends, very, very precious to me. And so I would, try to think of special things to do with them, special things that only I would do that my mom wouldn't do. So, I would have something special with them. So I always focused on that time as being separate and work, and not that I always succeeded, for sure. There were days when I would, have a hard day at work and come home and, be tired or irritated or whatever. So I wasn't always successful, but it was a priority with me my drive home from work was to take a deep breath, and I'd put on some music that was uplifting, and so that when I got home, it was just family time and everything else was behind me. And I think that you do have to make it a priority, that you do have to think about it, because it's not going to come natural, because we all come home tired no matter what kind of job you have. And so it just was important to me to have to build those special memories and have that special time with my children. And I didn't want to take away from that, from being burdened, come home burdened with the troubles of the day.
That's awesome. Jason, do you remember a story that you could share with our audience where you just kind of stood back and go, wow, Mom rocked? I mean, tell us one of those stories that just stand on your mind, if you can think of one. I'm sure you've got many.
Yeah, I was going to say there's quite a bit. I think, if I had to choose, I would say one story is that, going back to what she was talking about as far as like special, just trying to do special things or trying to make things. I remember I had appendicitis, and I want to say it was probably, I don't know, it was maybe like third or fourth grade, somewhere around there when I had it. And you got to know that, growing up, someone like my mom, who works a lot and was at a very demanding business, and at that time she was an executive at a pretty big company. And so growing up with that, and then also, with her investments and everything else that she was doing, she's pretty busy. And so when I had appendicitis, one thing that came out, and this isn't really one of those, just like this was just amazing sort of thing. It was more what I remember as being something that, when I had appendicitis and you're having surgery, and as a third grade, and if you guys remember, like, TV sitcoms back then, they didn't sugarcoat. It wasn't like the Snowflake Channel like it is today, when they try to make sure that nobody's afraid of anything, nothing bad happens, no feelings are hurt, right? Like, everyone's very, very politically correct. Now, back then, when we were watching TV sitcoms, like, kids were dying and like surgery was a real thing, right? Like different strokes and other when they had like their tonsils out or appendicitis. So like I was scared out of my mind. And so I would say that even with everything going on, she had to do with, my grandmother and everything else in the family, because she's always been basically the rock of the entire family, not just, her and, my kid, my sister, myself, and my grandma, but really my cousins and my aunts and uncles. She's definitely been, even as the youngest child, been the rock of the family. And so, when I was going through that and her dealing with everything she was dealing with, she made it she tried to do the best she could comforting me. And at that time, when I was a kid, I had, for some reason, I don't know why, but like I've always wanted to ride in a limo. Like limos were the thing for me. Whenever I saw a limo, I just imagined like how awesome it would be to ride in a limo. So as I was getting the news that I was, going to have surgery and stuff, and and you could imagine. I mean, I could imagine it now as a parent who's gone through some pretty crazy stuff with my own kids as far as like medical conditions and stuff like that. And you, Dave, you being a father, understanding like when your kid's like afraid, like it's hard, right? Like it's hard to deal with when
you'd rather go through the pain, take it all 10 times on yourself more than they watch it.
Exactly. And then so that was where she, she's like, well, trying to comfort me and stuff. And then, said, just want to surprise you and let you know that we were going to go on a trip at I think the Hawaii or someplace. And she let us know that she had got a limo. The limo was going to take us to the airport. And then when we landed, the limo was going to pick us up and take us back home. So, I know that's not like maybe a specific, like mom did all these cool things and then like it was an awesome thing, but it was really, it's a testament to when you have to show the reason that I remember, other than being like my first limo ride and I was like super amped by it, but it did, like, honestly, that did take, because that would probably be the one thing in the world at that time in my universe that would have taken my mind off of, because in my mind, I'm like, well,
having to go through that surgery. Yeah.
I'm going to die or something like that. Right. As a kid, just going through like kid type thoughts and stuff like that. But it's really one of those things, looking back at it, even then, is just thinking about of all the weight on the world of a parent, and then not just forget everything else I said, but just think of just a parent that has a kid that has to have surgery. But then, factor in, being in charge of a company, managing hundreds of people and being responsible to partners and financial stuff, and then having family that's depending on you outside of your immediate kids and stuff like that, to still be able to not just function, but then function at a higher level, and then, try to do what you can to help your child through something at that time was the scariest thing the kid's been with. So I would say that would probably be one of many things that has stood out where, she's done amazing stuff as a mom, but that would be one thing to where factoring everything in at that time, that would definitely be something that has stood out for me since, obviously since, was that like 87?
That's awesome.
So, right. Well, so we're looking at 22, or 30 years from then. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that shows the attention to detail, because it's so easy to get so wrapped up in things and in our business and our careers. And just, Marilyn, this fact that you showed the detail and the thought and the fullness to know what was going to help Jason get through that. That's just awesome. Marilyn, one of the tips that you would share as we wrap this up to the young women that are coming up and in the business, that you would share with them that it would give them a edge up on a step up in their career into the mortgage industry, especially into the C-suite?
Mm-hmm. I think the main thing is just doing a good job. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but there's just nothing that works, I think, for either men or women that is more important than paying attention to your job, doing your job well, and also respecting everybody. Even if somebody is disrespecting you in some way, don't take it to heart, that it really isn't about you, it's about them. It's something going on with them and some character flaw in them, and you just have to not let it derail you, because there are still some people in every industry that still sees women as being less than men, and you will see that. And so But for me, I think that's it. And also giving back. To me, when I see somebody who wants to progress in their career, I think, making sure that you are a friend to them, that if you share your knowledge with them, that also helps, because as you're helping others, you're helping yourself. You learn more. And I know I certainly did that as I was learning. I offered to help other people do things. So I learned from them. They learned from me. And, you just kind of build different relationships with different people that have different skills. And that definitely has served me well, I know, in my career. And so I think all of that, all of those aspects are really important. And find a mentor. Surround yourself with people who really know the business, who, are not out for their own gain, but enjoy helping other people, and surround yourself by those. And certainly people with positive attitudes, don't get pulled down with the negativity, with people, because, you can always find things to bring you down, or to be sad about, or hurt about, or this life is not always fair. But as long as you push that aside, be true to yourself, always treat people well, but do what you're being paid to do as well as you can, I think the other will follow. And at least it did for me. So I did want to say one thing about Jason. I have to give away something.
I was going to say, we got to have one Jason story.
Yeah, you got to have one Jason story.
Got to have really one good Jason.
Time to wrap it up.
And I think it was my first. I think it was my first indication that he was going to grow up to be a creative thinker, and we all know he loves to talk.
Oh, he is.
And we all know that he's full of ideas and he likes to share them.
Oh, he is. Yes.
But he's not real. Yeah, he won't get into like a lot of the paperwork and the detail and all of that. He wants to come up with the ideas, but let somebody else write them down. I mean, not that he's not a good writer, he really is, but mainly it's about his ideas that he writes about.
I relate to that.
So when he was in first grade, he came home. And I told him it was time to do his homework. And he said, well, he came up with this really great idea because it's a lot faster just to say the answers. So if I would just ask him the questions, he would give me the answers, and that would save a lot of time, and he would not have to spend an hour or whatever writing it down.
Right.
And so basically what he was saying in first grade is that his life would be a lot easier if he had a secretary assigned to him to write down the answers that he gave. So
that is so funny.
That was my Jason.
That's your Jason. Well, we're just so grateful for both of you, and I love that story. We're gonna use that here a couple of times in future interviews with Jason. But Jason, we can't close this out without talking about the Mortgage Syndicate and your podcast and all you're doing there. And we're going to give a last word to your mom to get a shout out about Mason-McDuffie and how people can join it and how other women can connect with you, Marilyn. But let's talk about the podcast. Jason, give us a quick update.
Yeah, so, right now I just actually recorded episode 40 of the Agent Marketer podcast, which I'm doing right now. And as you joined us, we at the end of last year, we created basically a podcasting, the real estate's first media network for podcasters and video producers and content creators, and which we call the Industry Syndicate, which Dave, you're a part of, just as I am. And then recently I mentioned that at the beginning of the show is I just started a new podcast with Christine Beckwith. Which is called the Mortgage X podcast, which is, with the Agent Marketer podcast, I focus on everything that's, like marketing, tech, innovation, stuff like that for, real estate and mortgage professionals. The Mortgage X podcast, kind of going back to my roots of being, born and raised in the mortgage industry, is focusing on those that are making this industry awesome. So the Mortgage X podcast, we're episode 5 comes out. So as this episode comes out, it would have came out last week. Episode 5 with Casey Crawford, who's the CEO of Movement Mortgage. That comes out as the next episode. And so we've had Anthony Casa on. We've had Laura Brandao who has a lot of similar, she used to work with her son as well, and she's the president of AFR Inc. We've got Kristen Meserly. We've got Clayton Collins, CEO of Housing Wire. So it's been a great ride doing that. The agent marketer recently just joined forces with Shred Media. Our good friend Josh Pitts founded that company. So I've been doing that since the beginning of April. So agent marketer is now part of Shred Media. So that would be the big cool announcement that not a lot of people know about. I mean, we've mentioned it on live just recently, but
right.
we're doing that, and we'll be, both Josh and I will be speaking at Mortgage Mastermind in Las Vegas, and partnering up with our good collective friend Barry Habib for MBS Highway, and so that's the update right now. Those are the things going on right now. I'm just very, very excited and blessed to everything that I'm doing, and this obviously this is something that will seem a little bit kind of to do with just because my mom is on the podcast right now, but she knows it's something I've said millions of times. I've said it on interviews and just recently with Laura Brandao, but everything that I am doing right now in the mortgage business and what I've learned is, the catalyst and genesis of that was my mom. And so, everything that I have done and will continue to do is because of the family connection, because of being able to see this from an outsider's perspective, and then given the autonomy and the the wherewithal to do that stuff. And I will, because my mom shared a story. I want to share the funniest story, which happened basically the second week of me working for my mom at the mortgage company. And this is just a real quick funny story. Is we were in a meeting, and before I joined the company, my mom was very concerned about, I want to make sure that both of us were very concerned that it didn't seem like any type of nepotism, didn't seem like I was getting any favorable treatment, that everything was split. So she had me reporting to somebody else, as opposed, even though I should have technically been reporting to her, I was reporting to another executive at the company, which again was fine with me with what I was doing. And so but I told her, as she knew, I said, just so you know that, like, if you happen to say something that I disagree with, I will disagree with it. Like, that's not how I came up in my business relationships. It's part of who I am and whatnot. So it was the second week, and I don't know if my mom remembers this, but it was the second week we're having a manager's meeting. So it was me, it was myself, other senior level managers, like the underwriting manager, closing, everyone in a meeting. And we were talking about stuff, and she had mentioned that we should be doing something. And I said, well, what we can't do, and this was more of just, and I was staying in my lane of technology and marketing and everything that I was doing. I said, we can't do this. We have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And she's all, but sweetie, we can't, so she called me sweetie. So here we are trying to, make sure that everything stays, professional and whatnot. And so, and of course in this meeting 2 weeks after I start, she calls me sweetie in front of all the managers. So it wasn't like, just like calling me sweetie. Oh, that would be like, because some of these managers I had, my mom had mentioned that I had been, coming to work as a kid.
Yeah. So they knew you already so well.
They knew me, but some of them had not, did not know that. So of course, for the next month and a half, sweetie was basically kind of like the, was the running joke of people calling me sweetie at the office.
Hey, sweetie, what's the support desk doing for you now? You could have all kinds of fun with that. That's a great story to end this on.
Yeah, so for everyone out there that's thinking about working with their mom, just be cognizant of that. Have the sweetie talk.
Be careful.
But even then, it'll probably slip out. So.
Yeah, that's so good. Marilyn, you run a great company. Mason-McDuffie has been around forever. How can people learn more about your company? Jay, we're going to put links on all of this on our website so we run this live. But how can people learn more about your company and how to get a hold of you?
Well, if you have a link to our website, definitely do that. They can email me personally, especially if women out there have any questions for me. I'm always happy to answer and talk to any female who's looking to build a career in mortgage banking. They can email me at mrichardson@masonmac.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions at all. And we are growing, so
you're growing still.
Amazing. We're growing rapidly still, and So would love for anybody to look us up on our website. And again, if they have any questions, contact me personally.
That's awesome. Jason, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so everyone can either go to shredmedia.com. I have the link to the podcast there, or they could check me out at agentmarketerpodcast.com, and they'll have links to podcast, the Mortgage X, my newsletter, and then also the Agent Marketer Coaching Group.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us on this special podcast honoring moms everywhere and sons who are creative and also want to get into the mortgage industry. So thank you both so much there today.
Thank you, David.
Dave, thanks for having us, man.
You betcha. I haven't resisted the temptation to say, as I was talking to Jason at the end, going, "Hey, sweetie, how could people get hold of you?" I just didn't want to do that to him. That was too funny. Anyway, great interview. Thank you to all of our guests today. And again, to our last couple of guests here, Jason and Marilyn. Go back and share these podcasts with others that are in the industry. They'll be up on our website, LykkenOnLending.com.